My name is I represent Libera. I will say a few very short words about us in a while, as I suspect that some of you, or most of you, don't know who we are. And I'm the director of this think tank. So, founded in 2011, we are politically unaffiliated and independent think tank here in Helsinki. We promote individual liberty, free enterprise, free markets, and a free society. Now, politically unaffiliated means that none of the Finnish political parties are overly fond of us. And independent means we have a wide private funding base with some 20 plus individual donors over the last 2.5 years. We do not accept public funding. This was an interesting distinction which Uskal already made, and we do not do consultancy work. We do not say that we are politically neutral. I think none of us are, but we do not endorse any particular political party. This is a very important point for us. And in terms of freedom, we are very keen on promoting the for us vital combination of liberty and responsibility, and generally want to contribute to a society where these two meet. We publish an assortment of stuff, mainly on the web. We do reports, we do analysis, we do research, although not with peer review type. We organize events, mostly debates, but most of all, we want to be an arena for thought and for action for all citizens, not just decision makers, and enable an open discussion on the topics and concepts of freedom and responsibility. And finally, as I sense a certain juxtaposition, considering I have my colleague from Vasemmista Forum here, yes, we are to the right when it comes to economic questions, but we are also 100% value liberal, which I guess in the Finnish political field makes us a lot more left than, for example, kokoomuslaiset. So, are think tanks a fad, or are they actually needed? According to the University of Michigan, who is, I think, the most reliable institution that catalogs and indexes think tanks in the world and researches them, there are 6,500 think tanks in the world. Roughly 2,000 of them are operating in the States, and almost 30 here in Finland, and this number is growing increasingly every year. And I think in that sense, it can be said that it is more a phenomenon, a social phenomenon, I think, than just a fad. But why do we exist, and are we in fact needed? Well, insofar as we are talking about politically unaffiliated actors, which is what I represent, from our point of view, think tanks remind citizens that they need to think for themselves and be critical of what kind of information they process, how they process it, also after they finish their education. Sometimes this is forgotten in our society today. We do not tell people what to think. All we do is ask that people do think and use their heads from time to time. Now, we do not claim to be a scientific actor. I think in Uskal's intro it said that think tanks seek to appear both scientific and politically relevant, but for us at Libera, we do have great respect for the academic world and the science which is produced in the academic world, in the scientific institutions, but we do not seek to portray ourselves as scientific. We could by no means do that. We don't have any on our staff who have done a PhD, for example. We do have multiple degrees, but none of us has a doctorate. So rather we talk about fact-based information and the dissemination of that information. And for me personally, science and academia, though very important in themselves, become really important only when they have the power to actually affect the lives of people. Now, I was supposed to become an archaeologist and focus on the Assyrian and Sumerian cultures, but at some point I realized I wouldn't be able to actually make the world a better place for anybody while doing so. So I just read the books now and try to do other stuff from 9 to 5. At any rate, in our work, I think in terms of disciplines, theories, lines of scientific inquiry, we rely mostly on economics. We rely on statistics but also on social psychology and to some extent on sociology. And in a theoretical sense, we are keen followers of classical liberalism, which arguably is more a philosophy than any certain theory. In terms of analysis, we do quantitative and qualitative approaches, and are maybe a bit more fond of the quantitative type due to the fact that Elina Lepomäki, who is our research director and who could not be here today, has a background in mathematics, in engineering, in economics, and in finance. As you probably see by now, I am following Uskali's questions more stringently than my colleague. I was also asked to talk about why are these disciplines, these theories, these scientific inquiries, why are they important for a think tank such as Libera, which arguably does not do scientific research? Well, I mean, the truth sets you free, right? So even for us being horrible right-wing people, at the end of the day, 1 + 1 will always be 2, and this is important. We approach everything we do based on hard facts, and without the stringent use of science, of theory, of methodology, our facts are not verifiable and really can't be communicated to the wider public. We are not politically neutral, like I said. I don't believe anybody else is, but in the information we are trying to put out, we at least strive to be as objective as we can. At the beginning of the year, we met with another Finnish think tank, the representatives of which are not here today, who clearly had made up their minds in advance what kind of people we are, and asked us what we do. Should we find something that doesn't support, for example, free markets? Do we publish it? Well, of course we do. We publish what we find, not what we hope to find. I think this is a very basic sort of important thing to keep in mind. In terms of how science differs from political ideology, I think 4 points of views, which also reflect the questioning that Uskali has brought forth. How does science compare to other sources of opinion, such as political ideology, in the shaping of policy conclusions? Well, I think one important fact is that science does not strive to be re-elected, and this is something I think you see a lot when you look at the political discourse. Science has no other agenda than presenting the results it has found, presenting facts and presenting the truth. Also, the line between science and non-science, between good science and less good science, well, I mean, good science can always be verified. It should be have a replicable element to it. It's truthful, whereas bad science is not, in the sense that good science is not used for distortion. It's not used for bringing forth results which are not there. It doesn't speculate. It just tells the truth the way you found it. Also, to what extent can political disagreements be reduced by appealing to scientific research? Well, in theory, as science is based on fact, it should be able to override any argument. But unfortunately, especially in political dialogue and in political debate, this is, I think, rarely the case. Affect almost always overrides cognition. Even if we're told that 1 + 1 is 2, if we have an emotional, strong basis for believing it's not that way, emotion usually rules over cognition and over fact. And this also, of course, is tied to the last question of, in regard to what sorts of policy issues is the contribution of science minimal or non-existent? Well, in all those policy issues that evoke feeling, and this is, I think, somewhat telltale of the industrialized countries we have here in Europe. We have the luxury of being able to react with feeling to some sort of, or to political arguments, whereas people in other countries need to fight for staying alive or being able to vote, being able to trust the authorities, being able to have clean water. So I think this is true especially of the debate we see in Europe. Emotions will always overrule cognitive arguments, and they also rule most political issues. So the challenge, I think, for think tanks, and in a sense maybe also the scientific community, is how do we get people to actually understand and absorb facts, despite emotions, despite despite having a very strong affective basis for believing that something is right or wrong, even though you have a verified content in front of you. And this is not exclusive to think tanks, like I said. I think this is something the scientific world maybe should consider as well. And if I should need to summarize our point of view to this whole discussion, which we've been invited here today to hear, I think it's important to say that think tanks and science are not rivals. We are not the jealous little brother of the scientific world or the academic world. Rather, we see ourselves as a vessel for disseminating the very important work and information and knowledge which is done in the scientific world. I was short